personalities toward the president and to direct their remarks to the chair. And under the Speaker's announced policy of January 9th, 2023, the chair recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Grothman, for 30 minutes.
Thank you. We just got done with the debate last night, and obviously a lot of Americans are discussing public policy. I think I want to address what I consider the three greatest crises facing America today, only one of which was brought up by the press last night. The one brought up by the press last night, which cannot be overstated, is the crisis at the border. I was disappointed that last night people did not talk about the size of the crisis. Okay, we're in a situation right now in which we have about 250,000 people crossing our border every month. Under President Trump, that number, varying on the month, was between 5,000 and 10,000 people. So we've gone from 10,000 to over 200,000 people coming here last month, and I think the press should be doing a better job of describing the size of that crisis. I think they also have to do a better job of questioning the amount of legal immigrants that are coming here. Some people are under the impression, or seem to be under the impression, that people who are coming to this country, and as the result changing this country, is only on the southern border. Actually, we have almost 1 million people a year, depending on the year, 850 to 950,000 people coming here legally. So it is not impossible for people to come here, and I think there ought to be more focus on the 900 or 950,000 people who are sworn in every year as Americans. I also think there ought to be more focus on the, depending on the month, 7,000 to 9,000 unaccompanied minors coming in this country. For those of us who watched the debate last night, President Biden tried to weigh in on supposedly people kept apart from their parents. That was for a short period of time because their parents committed crimes. Here we have between 7,000 and 9,000 people coming in every month who are unaccompanied by either parent. And as the result, I think it's possible that they will never see their parents again. But the press does not emphasize or talk about what should be very discussed in this country, and that is, should we continue to allow children in this country without either of their parents present? And if we are going to do it, what is going to become of those children? Because we do know that, depending upon your source, tens of thousands of these children, we not only have them in this country without their parents, but we don't even know where they are. So I think we have to talk a lot more about what's going on our southern border and talk a lot more in specifics as to, do we continue to allow unaccompanied minors in this country, and exactly how many people should be coming into this country, what we would describe illegally. And we should talk about the fact that we have a new program under President Biden in which 30,000 people a month, or 360,000 people a year, are being let in through the parole program through Haiti, or if you're Haitian, if you're Cuban, for some Central American countries. Another significant way America is changing and is not being addressed. Now, the next issue that I'd like to talk about, we had a hearing yesterday touching upon the idea of racial preferences or racial breaks in employment, be it government employment, be it employment in businesses that do business with contractors. It seems strange that in America we have programs based on the theory that we have a huge amount of racism in America. We live at a time in which the wealthiest Americans, or the wealthiest group, is people from India. Second wealthiest group, in the sources I find, Philippines. Third wealthiest group, Chinese. People from Cuba are doing very well. People from other countries in the Caribbean are doing well. But there is this drumbeat that America has a horrible racist past and a horrible racist present, which I just think is not true at all. So we have to ask about the motivation of people who keep these programs coming, in which we identify people by where their great-great-grandparents come from. There recently was a book that came out called America's Cultural Revolution by a guy by the name of Christopher Rufo, which kind of confirmed my worst suspicions. And that is the reason why we're taking almost all of these immigrant groups and trying to give them preferences, is that the goal is to divide America. There is a small but determined number of progressives in America who would like to permanently change America, have a different form of government. These people have been around in America in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. They've certainly been around in the 60s. And during most of this time, they felt the way to overthrow America or permanently change America was through a class system. And they wanted to turn everybody against the wealthy people and have a revolution based on this, and we'd have a new or different kind of government. Well, eventually, in the 70s or 80s, they gave up on that. They realized that wouldn't work. The American middle class is too strong. Americans love their freedom too much, and they were not going to be able to succeed in giving us a different form of government by breaking into people, by breaking people down into how much money they were making. But it came upon to some of them that one way you could destroy America is create friction via race. And in the early 80s, they decided that's what they were going to try to do, and they would go through America's institutions, the first institutions being the institutions based on education. Now, again, it seems to me absurd that of all countries in the world, you could divide America or make America unstable based on race. I mean, there are other countries in which there are racial or religious divides that are really divide the country. In India, you look at the Hindu and the Muslim. In Nigeria, you look at the Hindu and the Muslim. In Iraq, you look at the Shiite and the Sunni. You could even look at a country like Canada, which has problems because you have the English speakers and the French speakers, or a huge number of countries in Africa which are broken down by racial tribes. But America is such a great melting pot. We all get along so well. As just mentioned, people come here from all around the globe other than Europe and succeed wildly. It seems bizarre that anybody would say the way to break down America is divide by race. But that is what they're trying to do. Another example of the lack of racism in America is if you look up the new people who come to America, who are sworn in as new citizens, and they have these ceremonies in Wisconsin every month in the city of Milwaukee. I've attended several of them. At least none of the 10 countries that we allow to come in here and get sworn in American citizens are European countries. They are countries from Southeast Asia. They are countries from the Indian subcontinent. They are countries from all over Latin America. I mean, it seems almost ridiculous that someone would say America has a racist problem or are so Eurocentric when the vast majority of people who we allow to become citizens are not of European descent. Another thing that makes this so strange or shows how divisive the left is trying to be is they do all they can to tell as many people as possible that they are being picked on and should view themselves as a separate ethnic identity. How do they do that? They do it by giving preferences, be it in government contracting, be it in government employment, based on race, regardless of how well you've had it otherwise. And here in America, people pushing the diversity, equity, inclusion will say that if my grandparents came here from India and I'm in the process of inheriting $20 million, I still get preferences and should be, when I go to the ballot box, presumably, be looking out for other people from India or be looking out from other people of Japan and not just voting as an American. Another example of this is their bizarre idea of trying to define people by where they come from. I'll give you an example. Right now, if somebody comes here from Spain, they are not considered a picked-upon minority. But if somebody with Spanish ancestors spends 3 or 4 generations in Cuba, they are considered to be Latin Americans in need of special help. Now, obviously, I don't think the average American could tell the difference between somebody who came here from Spain or somebody who had Spanish ancestry who went through Cuba. But in the eyes of the DEI specialists, in an effort to get as many people as possible walking around with a chip on their shoulder, in an effort to ingratiate themselves to as many different people as possible, their rules are such that if you are of Spanish descent but spent a couple generations in Cuba, your ancestors did, well, guess what? We need to give you special privileges as far as government contracting, government hiring, being hired by companies that do business with the government. So it's something that I think we have to bring up more. I think it's something that should be a topic in America. We recently added a new group to get preferences for government contracts or get preferences in government hiring, and that is a group of people called North Africans or Middle Easterners. And again, the Biden administration, even though immigrants here from Iran do very well, very great people, and as the result succeed overwhelmingly in America, the Biden administration has said that if you come here and your ancestors are from Iran, from Egypt, from Morocco, from Gaza, quite frankly, you will be treated as an aggrieved minority and you will be given preferences over Americans who are already in the United States. And we should discuss, was that the right thing? The incompetent American press corps has hardly publicized that. I go home and I explain this to the people back home. How come we never heard of it? You never heard of it because the American press corps is not particularly competent. But that should have been something that is being discussed. It should have been discussed at the debate last night. The press should have said, are you in favor of the policy that if an immigrant comes here from Iran, from Syria, from Gaza, from Morocco, you will be given preferences over the native-born Americans when it comes to government hiring, working for government contractors, or being the beneficiary of a government contract, or for that matter, being the beneficiary of a government grant. So I strongly encourage the press corps to educate Americans what's going on here and to see whether we should continue this policy. I mentioned for a second, by the way, about people who are working for companies with a government grant. Very few people know that if you have a company that does business with the government and you have at least 50 employees and do $10,000 of business with the federal government, you are required to fill out a form every year listing the racial background of every one of your employees together with their compensation and job description. And the purpose of those forms is so that the government can look at them and perhaps cause trouble from you if the answers on the form are not what they like. Again, if you're working, say, for a company like, we'll take General Motors, who I'm sure does a lot of business with the government. Most people do not know that they are required to fill out a form every year listing the race and sex and compensation of every employee. Is that something we should be doing? And as the result, it means that when it comes to hiring or promoting or letting people go, your race will have a play into how those decisions are made. So I think that's something that should be discussed more. We had a hearing on some of this the other day. I do not think America can remain the great country that it is if we are teaching, particularly our immigrant groups, that they should be asking for or expecting something based on their racial history. Not to mention, you're not dealing with merit. Inevitably, if you're saying, I'm not going to pick the best person, I'm going to pick persons by their background, you're going to lower the quality of engineers, lower the quality of product that these companies put out, lower the quality of our medical professionals, what have you. It's time to get rid of this stuff. Most of these rules began to be put in effect in 1965 under Lyndon Johnson, so we have lived with them, though I think the companies are more afraid of them now, but we've lived with them for 55 years. It's time to put an end to these programs. One more comment as far as the effect it's having on the native born. There was a study done not long ago of 88 companies in the S&P 200, and when they got done looking at the number of people hired during 2001, 2002 in those companies, 74% were non-white, which indicates what? If almost none of the new hires were white, it indicates to me that the companies were going out of the way due to the pressure to be all DEI to not hire white people, which is, I do believe somebody should look into this further and see why only 6% of the new hires were white. The next issue that was not debated last night, but it is what I thought was the number one issue facing America when I ran for this job 10 years ago, and sadly we're not talking about it. When you talk to people my age, they uniformly feel that America is not as great a country or favorable country to live in as the country we grew up in. And when you ask them why, one of the top 2 or 3 reasons, frequently the number one reason, is the breakdown in the family. The breakdown in the family did not just happen. There are people who have never wanted the old-fashioned nuclear family to succeed or be dominant in the United States. This goes back to Karl Marx and Engels, who wrote at length about the fact that they wanted to get rid of the family. They wanted the dominant unit to be the government. They wanted the government to raise people. They wanted the government to brainwash people or teach people how to think. It is unfortunately apparently not uncommon for people in American universities to follow or be a little bit entranced by the writings of Marx and Engels. And as the result, we see Americans, say in the 1960s, some of the leading feminists, some of the people involved in the Black liberation movement, outright opponents of the old-fashioned nuclear family. Angela Davis was an example of somebody well known for people of my age who was a very important revolutionary figure in the 1960s who eventually came out for the breakdown of the family. There are right now approximately 78 programs in which your eligibility for the program is based on the income level of your household. Because the way they calculate poverty, it means that if you have one decent wage earner in the household, you probably aren't eligible for these programs, which means as a practical matter, if you have one parent, frequently the mother, in the household, she is eligible for all sorts of benefits. Eligible for free housing, eligible for free food, eligible for free health care, eligible for free Pell Grants to go to college. If she would marry someone with a decent income, she would lose all these benefits. Another benefit that can easily be $6,000 to $8,000 is the Earned Income Tax Credit. If she decides to work a little, she also may be eligible for free daycare. So you add up these benefits, and it's not unusual to find hypotheticals in which someone can be penalized by $25,000 or $30,000 tax-free income if you decide not to be married. And conversely, you can lose $25,000 or $30,000 if you decide to be married. This is a problem that has been pointed out since Senator Monahan in the late 60s, so nothing has been done about it. And the rate of children born without a mother and father at home has skyrocketed since the middle 60s when these programs were put into effect. As a matter of fact, usually what we do is we throw more money in these programs, and in the current budget that Congress is working through for the year beginning October 1st, President Biden did try to increase the number of these programs, which in other words is to put more of a bribe on people to not live in the what they call the old-fashioned nuclear family. By the way, another group that does not like the nuclear family, or what they describe as the so-called Western prescribed nuclear family, was the original founders of Black Lives Matter. And it's shocking the number of people who work in this chamber who were happy, even after Black Lives Matter came out against the nuclear family, who would stand by it, who would attend rallies with those signs out there. But it just shows people the power of people who have this anti-family agenda. In any event, I am very interested in when the new Congress is sworn in next January as to what the new president, who will work with that Congress, thinks about the huge marriage penalties we have in our society, as we seemingly in this country seem to have a goal of having more and more people raised in single-parent families rather than married couples. And a variety of problems come from this. Well, there are wonderful children raised by all parents. Statistically, it would be better in many cases, probably most cases, to have both the mother and father at home. And the current system, which frequently discourages in particular the father from being at home, it takes away the purpose in a lot of these men's lives. And I think a lot of the problems we have in society, depression, crime, drugs, can be attributed to the fact that the American government today seems to not want to give men a purpose in life by encouraging them to be part of an old-fashioned nuclear family. So in any event, I would ask the press corps, as they cover the presidential race, to see where the candidates stand on the idea of racial preferences. Should we continue to say, for example, that if somebody is 1/4 Peruvian, they therefore can fill out the form and say, I'm an aggrieved minority? I wonder, do they agree with the idea that immigrants who come here from Iran or Gaza are immediately entitled to preferences in government employment or preferences in hiring by corporations? I'd like to know that. I'd like to know where the candidates stand on the huge marriage penalties we have in effect, which appear to be put in place by people who do not want children raised with both parents at home. Do they plan on doing something about it? I'd like to know, because it's one of the biggest problems we're facing in America. It's not talked about. And then when it comes to illegal immigration, I'd like a little more discussion of numbers. And if we're going to begin to take people outside the normal pathway to become a citizen, how many people should that be every month? Should it be 5,000 a month like we had under President Trump? Should it be 200,000? Should it be 300,000? Should it be over 400,000? I don't know, but I think the press should try to nail down the candidates on that. So in any event, those are 3 issues that I think a competent press corps would be putting out there in the newspapers so that people can analyze those issues and decide which way the government wants to handle each one of those issues. Thank you.
Does the gentleman yield back?
Yeah, I yield back.
Okay, thank you.